Hey, everyone. Welcome to Unique Ways with Thomas Gerard, an audio podcast. Got an awesome guest on today. He's a leader in conversion optimization, digital leadership, and UX design thinking. He has over 25 years experience working with clients such as Doctors Without Borders and PUMA, and he's the author of 6 books and a well-respected presenter. Please join me in welcoming Paul Boag. Welcome.
Hi, thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it. It's very nice to get your message out of the blue.
Great. Any questions before we start?
No, none whatsoever. Let's just jump into this thing.
Okay, number one, tell me a little bit more about yourself. What do you do?
So I mean, you pretty much summed it up in the introduction, to be honest. I've worked in digital my entire career. Back to 1994, I started. And obviously, over those years, I've done a huge variety of different roles. But these days, I'm primarily focused on user experience design in the broadest sense of that word. So I know a lot of people use user interface and user experience design interchangeably, but in my case, I'm interested in the entire user experience, both through an interface, but also through things like email, landing pages, social media, any interaction that an individual has with an organization.
Great. Okay. And question two, what's a key piece of knowledge that makes you different?
That's a really good one. I was thinking about that because obviously you were kind enough to send the question through ahead of time, and I don't think there is. Um, the truth is, everything that you ever want to know is online these days. So I don't think knowledge in itself is a differentiating factor anymore. I think instead, really the big difference is around your ability to implement that knowledge and your experience in overcoming hurdles that you face. So one of the advantages of the fact that I've been working in the field for nearly 30 years now is that there is no sector I'm not familiar with, or it feels like that at times, and there are no problems that I haven't come across in some shape or form over the years. So it's more experience, I think, that differentiates me rather than a particular piece of knowledge, if that makes sense.
Great. Yeah, that's great. Just a note for our audience, if you're interested in these UX episodes, check out our recent episode with Jeff Gottelf. He's the author of Lean UX. So number three, why this of all things? Why do you do what you do?
Um, Now I could give some kind of trite answer to this and say, oh, it's my calling, it's my passion, it's, what I've always wanted to do. But the truth is that'd probably be a lie, because when I started out in my career, this job didn't exist. The internet didn't exist. Um, my original interest was in graphic design, and it's that principle of communicating with people that really holds me and excites me. And so if you look at my job these days, everything that I do really revolves around communication in some form or another. Sometimes that is communication through a user interface and making something clear and accessible and understandable. Other times it's through training and teaching. Other times it's through coaching. So there's quite a kind of, the theme is that I like to enthuse and excite people and make their lives easier. So I think that's really what draws me to the field and what keeps me going.
Great. And some people struggle with number four, but the question is, what does your future look like?
Um, I'm pushing into my 50s now. And so my child has left home, gone off to university. So really my future is very much around lifestyle. And I know you're going to come on to questions about lifestyle later. But yeah, for me, it's about getting a work-life balance. It's about um, living the life that I want to live, and when you're in the early days of your career, it's all about building your career. The truth is there's kind of nowhere for me to go, up in my career. So it becomes now more about, what I want to be doing with the rest of my life, outside of work.
Mm.
I'm very lucky to be able to combine both my work and the life that I want to lead already. So yeah, the future's looking pretty bright, and as we get on more into the conversation of work-life balance and those kinds of things, I think that'll become apparent.
Great. And five, we say, is unique to this podcast. The question is, let's talk about location. How does the
Mm.
notion of place play into what you do?
Well, that's extremely interesting. And it's a really fascinating area for me. Um, I'm going to have to give some context, and this does get on to your question number 9, where you talk about, are you a digital nomad? And the
Mm.
truth is, yes, I am, and so that kind of relates to this question of place. So, we made a decision. We planned it for probably best part of a decade that we would. I'm based in the UK. We were going to buy an RV in America, and we were going to spend half of our year traveling around North America. So we spend approximately 6 months at home and 6 months traveling.
Mm.
Um, and as part of that, obviously this notion of place plays a big deal, so I can work from literally anywhere. And that has become increasingly easy to do thanks to things like Starlink, because I'm often off grid,
Mm.
in the middle of nowhere, and I can still carry on working.
Mm.
Um, but the only limitations, as far as I see it, from a place perspective these days, from work and place, is in terms of time zones. So, yeah, it does create some complications, when my time zones shift from one location to another. I couldn't decide to arbitrarily go and work in Australia, which I'm currently eyeing as the place that I want to go, and want to do the same thing in Australia. So the only limitations for me with the concept of place is time zones. And I get antsy if I stay in the same place for too long. I like traveling. I like being on the road. So yeah, it's a big deal to me, that question.
Awesome. Six is, if you had to start from the beginning, what advice would you give your former younger self?
Yeah, that's a really difficult one, isn't it? 'Cause, I mean, it's a very common question, but it's a really difficult one to answer because in some ways, the mistakes you make along the way are half the journey.
Mhm.
And you kind of need to feel free to make those mistakes, and you've kind of got to learn. Um, I think the main advice, or the main thing I'd want to say to my younger self, is to reassure myself,
Mm.
reassure me that even the mistakes that you're making have value. But if I had to really kind of, what advice would I give? I think it would be to focus less on the latest shiny piece of technology
Mm.
and more on soft skills.
Mm.
Getting to understand people, how people think, how people behave, how to interact with people, because people don't change. So those skills, once you've learnt them, they'll last you a lifetime. While in my industry, people spend a lot of time learning the next greatest piece of software, and of course, it's a flash in the pan. Even if it lasts 5 years, it's still a flash in the pan compared to your overall career. And probably the biggest example of this was Flash, Adobe Flash,
Mm.
back in the day, where everybody jumped on this bandwagon of Adobe Flash, and I really didn't like Flash because it was a closed proprietary system, and so I never really got into it. And it became an irrelevance because one day Steve Jobs turned around and said, I'm not going to support that, and it killed it dead, you know?
Mm.
So you've got to be very careful where you place your time and what you spend your time learning.
It's a great example. So number seven, what's a day in your life like?
Yeah, I saw this question and it was like, oh no. Um, my days are vastly different. Depending on what country I'm in, for a start. But also the variety of work that I do is vastly different. What I can say is that um, I aim only to work 4 hours a day of paid client work. Um, so I work intensely for those 4 hours, um, but then I try and walk away from it. And there'll be a lot of people going, "Oh, I wish I could do that." And I'm doing an 8 hour day at work, and maybe even more than that, especially over in the States. I know you guys work really hard over there. But it doesn't mean you're productive in those 8 hours. I think it's quite hard for a human being to be productive for an 8 hour day. So I do split my days down into 4 1 hour sessions. I'm a great fan of napping. Perhaps that's a sign of my age. But I like to have an afternoon nap, so that always goes in it. In terms of the type of work I do in those 4 hour slots, it could be at the moment I'm preparing some presentations that I'm going to be running. Other times it will be working on wireframes and prototypes. Other times it will be I do a lot of coaching, so I do coaching calls and that kind of thing. So it's quite a mixed variety of things. I'm very much a generalist. I get bored very, very easily. I have a very short attention span, so I need a good variety of work to keep me motivated and keep me interested.
Nice. And eight's around lifelong learning. It's a popular topic. How do you stay up to date?
Um, I think there's a couple of things that I do. One is that I don't even try in some senses to keep up to date with everything. There's just too much. Instead, what I do is I pick a few individuals who I really respect and I pay attention to what they are paying attention to, right? So they're almost curators for me. That's part of it. The other thing I do is I take part in online communities of my peers. And so they inevitably will go, "Oh, have you seen this or have you seen that?" And I pay attention to those communities. Um, and the other thing that I've learned is not to start diving down a rabbit hole the first time you hear something cool mentioned. So for example, one thing that I've really fallen in love with recently is the Arc browser. I don't know if you're aware of this. It's a new browser. It's got AI baked into it, etc.
Mm.
Really, it's irrelevant what it is, but I've fallen in love with it. Oh, this is a new cool thing, and I'm really into it. But I didn't, I heard about that maybe 3 or 4 times before I paid attention to it. Because if you're hearing about something repeatedly, it's probably a sign that it's worth your attention and time.
Mm.
And so I'm quite hesitant about where I place my time, and I'll only pay attention to something if I'm either it comes from a trusted advisor or I'm hearing about it multiple times.
Great. And nine is the digital nomad question. It's around tools. What tools do you use? Do you use digital and analog tools?
I'm not a big analog person, actually. I know a lot of people go, "Oh, I love my notebook and couldn't be without it," and I do wireframing by hand. I'm not. I'm a completely digital guy. Everything I run is digital. Um, from a digital nomad perspective, so traveling around and doing stuff, I find that there are my tools are fairly consistent, really, as long as from a hardware point of view, I have a good laptop, I have a decent mic that I try and take around with me. Um, I have my Starlink when I'm away in my RV. I keep it pretty minimalistic and bare bones. There's not a lot that I carry around with me. In terms of software tools, I spend a lot of time in Notion. I find that a great way of organizing my life.
Mm.
Um, I've already mentioned the Arc browser, I find very useful because it's got the ability to summarize web pages, so I can take in information much quicker. Um, but nothing particularly special, really.
Mm. Okay. And halfway number 10 is around work-life balance. How do you deal with it?
Yeah. Um, I've changed a lot over the years for this one because I've worked for myself since 2001, I think I want to say.
Mm.
Yes, 2001.
Mm.
Um, and I ran an agency for 13 years where I was working with other people. And then since then, I've been an independent consultant. So I've got a lot of freedom now in when and how I work. Um, and over the years, I've tried all kinds of different things in terms of, very clearly distinguishing between this idea of work and life. But I've now changed over the time. I think partly because I'm now so experienced in working for myself. So I kind of don't need those guardrails of dividing life up in that way. For me, life is life, right? And some of life is work and some of life is other things. But this kind of idea of you have work and you have life as two separate things isn't something that I really subscribe to anymore. Um, the only thing that I have to keep an eye on is when you run any kind of business, it can become like this monster that you have to keep feeding. And so you can get into a situation where you're working sorry, you're living to work when really you should be working to live. So my kind of overall mentality is I do enough work to enable me to have the life that I want to lead and no more. So I could potentially earn a lot more than I do. Um, but to what end? What does that get me? And so, for me, that kind of balance between work and life ultimately is about um, having a clear idea of what you want from your life, where you want to go, and then ensuring that your work facilitates that and no more. So, for example, I could work a lot more and buy myself a fancier RV for traveling around America, but then I wouldn't have the time to go off every afternoon because when I'm in America, I work in the mornings and go off in the afternoon to explore, and see stuff. So what would the point of that be? Do you know what I'm getting at?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Great. Okay. And number 11, if you weren't doing what you do now, what would you be doing?
Um, yeah, that's a tricky one. I honestly don't know.
Mm.
Um, I had a hankering at one stage to do theatre set design of all things, or practical effects in movies. Those kinds of things appealed. But to be honest, I can't. I think the only thing that I could practically imagine me doing maybe is teaching.
Mm.
I perhaps would quite enjoy that. Not young kids that don't want to really learn, but university teaching people about UI and UX and that kind of thing.
Mm.
Um, that would potentially appeal, but I don't really want to do anything else. So I don't think about it too much.
Great. And 12, what would you not like to do with your career?
I wouldn't like to. I was about to say I wouldn't like to work for anybody else.
Mm.
But I don't think that's true actually, because I would be. There's a part of me. One of the downsides of being a consultant and a freelancer is that you don't get to follow things through. Um, and I miss that. I miss being able to work on a project and see it all the way through to the end, and to nurture that product, that digital service or digital product over time. So I guess that's not true. Do you know, if I'm being super honest, I wouldn't want to be an entrepreneur.
Mm,
Which is a bit weird because I do run my own business, so I guess in some senses I am, but I'm quite a risk adverse person. And
mm,
I think to be a good entrepreneur, you have to roll the dice and see how things go and just go for it. And I don't think I've got that in me, and I think I would live in a constant state of anxiety.
mm.
So no, I think if anything, it would be that.
Great. And how about a favorite word, quote, or sentence?
Yeah, this is the minute I saw this question, I instantly knew the quote because I do have a favorite quote, but it is gonna um somewhat run against what I've just said, because my favorite quote is a quote by Winston Churchill, which is success is going to from failure to failure with no loss of enthusiasm. And
Mm.
I absolutely love that mentality that you are going to fall, you are going to mess up. That's part of the journey, and the key is to remain enthusiastic, and keep going, perseverance, and that kind of thing.
And how about a least favorite word, quote, or sentence?
Hustle. I hate that phrase. Gary Vaynerchuk used to talk about it a lot. Um, and I really dislike the idea that we should all be hustling. And we should all have a side hustle, and we should, all of this kind of stuff. It's really interesting as he's got older and he's had family and other things going on in his life. He stopped talking like that, but it's become a part of the lexicon. This idea of hustling, and why? Why? To what end? To earn money for what point? um why can't we enjoy the journey? Why can't we enjoy life rather than always be focused on some end goal? And we have to give up the now in hope of the future. We have to work hard now in the hope of some big payoff later on down the line. I'm almost having the same. One of the problems you get to as you age a little bit, you start thinking about pensions and all that business, and it's like, and retirement. Should I be saving and working hard now for a retirement that might never happen? And for me, that word hustle is that kind of living for the future rather than living for the now that really gets under my skin.
Nice. And 15, if you had to choose one word to describe yourself, what word would you choose?
I think other people are better placed to say that rather than me. Okay, if I had to describe myself, enthusiastic is the word
Mhm.
I would like people to associate with me.
Mm.
Um, Enthusiasm could get you a long way. And just getting excited about what you do and excited with other people is a really powerful tool. I remember presenting some work I was doing once to a client, and I needed the client's approval to carry on with it, basically. And I was telling him all about it and what I've been doing and my thinking and all of the rest of it, getting quite animated as I tend to do. And he said at the end of once I finished talking, I got allowed him to get a word in edgeways. He said to me, "How can I say no to you, Paul? It would be like kicking a puppy." And I think that's a great, that's what you want out of life, to be as enthusiastic as an overexcited puppy. So
Mm.
that's what I try and do, and that's how I try and live my life.
What keeps you up at night?
Again, this is one of those questions where I could give some profound answer, that, oh, you're worrying about the future of AI or climate change or something like that. But it would be a lie, really. What keeps me up at night is I worry about money. I
Mm.
don't know why. I don't, I'm doing very well for myself. I have no reason to worry about money. But that is the thing that keeps me up at night. So that's the truthful answer rather than the glib answer.
Thank you. What's a dream you're chasing?
I'm not.
Mm.
I'm not chasing a dream anymore. partly because I'm trying to encourage myself to live in the now and to not always live for tomorrow. But probably more honestly, is I'm living my dream now. Like I said, we spent about 10 years planning how I can run my business on the road from anywhere and travel like we are traveling now. So um in most ways I'm just, I want to just keep living the dream.
Mm,
There's actually, ironically, there's a YouTube channel that my wife followed for years called Keep Your Daydream, which is a YouTube channel about people that went RVing full time. And that really inspired us over the years to kind of push towards this way of living. And yeah, so that's what I'm doing now, and I long may that continue. Maybe I guess my dream a little bit is okay, there's a lot of places in the world. I want to go to them all.
mm, nice. Last few here. What inspires you?
Um, that's a tough one, actually. Not because there's not things that inspire me, but there are lots of things. I'm quite easily inspired and excited. Um, People can inspire me a lot. People that have, especially people that have not blindly followed the path well trodden. People that have done something a bit different with their lives or gone in a different direction. They can inspire me quite a lot. Even if it hasn't worked out for them, or even if it's something that I think is a ridiculous way to live. I think there's still they're still inspiring for trying something different. Um, but I am, if I'm honest with you, I think the main thing that inspires me is the new and the different. In all its forms. I like going to new places. I like seeing new things. I like playing with new technology. I like seeing new design trends. Um, that's what inspires me. A great example of this is where you've done when you've done the job as long as I have. Um, you become a little bit stale. You know you've almost learned all there is to learn. I know that sounds so arrogant, and I don't mean it like that. But there are very few projects that challenge you or kind of keep you on your toes. And then some company comes along and throws AI into the world, right? And it's like, oh no, that changes everything. That makes everything different. And suddenly I'm excited again and inspired again because my world has been turned upside down and now I have to adapt to that. So I guess change inspires me quite a lot, really.
That's a good answer. Number 19, any advice you'd like to share?
Um, just I think this principle, and I think it's come through in everything that I've said, really, that um work is just a part of your life. Work should enable your life, um, rather than your life enabling your work. And there, especially when you're younger, and especially those people that work in the technology field, um, they they love it. They love it. They stay up at 3 a.m. playing around with stuff because they enjoy it, and that's absolutely fine. Um, but it's being okay when it's not like that anymore. And you don't have to keep that level of enthusiasm. You can get enthusiasm and excitement from other areas of your life too. I think that would be probably the advice I would give on that.
Nice. And finally, number 20, how can our listeners keep tabs on you? What's our call to action?
um, Probably I've kind of I am still on social media, but I've kind of given up on it a little bit. It's not interesting like it was in the early days. Where and I know nobody reads blogs anymore, so I won't necessarily just refer you to that. But if you go to boagworld.com/subscribe, you can sign up for my newsletter. And that's really where I kind of share my approach to things, share how I see the field of user experience design, how to develop in that area, those kinds of things. I mean, you can look on the website as well, and there's all the back issues on there, so you can see whether it's something that appeals to you or not. But if you do want to follow me, that's probably your best bet these days. That's where I get most excited. I enjoy doing that.
Great. Well, thanks so much for joining. You really kind of express the ethos of this show, which is around people's lives. And so thank you so much for sharing that.
No problem. An absolute pleasure.